Good morning. I'm Major Jeff Wright. It's an incredible honor to be here today, and my objective is to help you understand just why Spooky 4-1's actions were so noteworthy and so heroic. First, any maintainers out there who are with me in Afghanistan? Anybody y'all who's still here? All right, well, thank you. Hoo-yah! You guys are awesome. Like I said to you in the hangar when I come visit you, if it weren't for what you do, none of this would happen. We needed Spooky 4-1 that day to keep us alive, and the reason it was in the orbit is because of your hard work. You put it there. So these guys are getting recognized for it, and rightfully so, but I want you to have a little bit of pep in your step as well, because you deserve some recognition. Thank you from the ST community. Okay, so for those of you guys who might not be familiar with Special Tactics, who we are and what we do, we're the Air Force's ground special operators. Air-ground integration is our specialty, and so in layman's terms, we're the guys who are usually with our Green Beret brothers, with our SEAL brothers. We're the ones on the radio directing airstrikes, coordinating movement in the air, conducting air traffic control, that kind of thing. We do a whole lot of other things, but the purpose of me saying that is to let you know that we are habitually with these guys when they're out on operations. So for this battle, I was in charge of a 7-man special tactics team. 5 of my CCTs were with their habitually aligned ODAs, and I had an ALO with me, and the 2 of us were in Major Tomberlin's hip pocket up on the OP, the observation point, and we were acting as a doctrinal fire support team integrating air, ground, and electronic fires. So to get you an idea of exactly what this terrain looked like, I'm going to ask you to make a terrain model with me. So take your right hand, like you're holding a beer can or something, and then have it about chest level right in front of you. And this kind of crab claw shape is what the terrain looked like. One way in, one way out, and that's the wrist. It had a front row, which is the thumb, and then a back longer row, which is the finger. Staff Sergeant Rob Henry was the lead JTAC on the clearance element, and he was at the wrist when they pushed in, and they never really even got up to the knuckle because of how thick the terrain was and how bad the fighting was. This was a really challenging task under any conditions, but the night in question exceeds anything that I've ever seen in training or in combat. So the intelligence that Captain Carnell was talking about, a couple of days before this operation, that same intel guy handed me a literal 3-ring binder this thick, filled with multi-source intelligence on everything we knew about this objective area. It was a lot. It was a very intimidating thing. These guys were completely prepared. They had false walls in the compounds. They had spike strips in the ground that people would step on. They had bombs in the walls. They had people above you, below you, the ability to move subterranean between places. If you've been on YouTube and you know the video of the guys pouring aluminum into anthills and they see how deep that thing goes, just on the surface it looks like just an anthill, but it goes all the way down, and that's exactly how this place was. It was like the mines of Moria, and then it went all the way back, all the way down, and they could pop up and down at will. So when the assault force, let me pause there 1 second. The reason why we're having trouble explaining just how bad this was is that it lacks recent historical context. We literally have to reach back to World War II, examples like Normandy or Iwo Jima or Aben Email, to get an accurate analog for just how nasty this terrain was and how much they were prepared for our assault. So when the assault force began the clearance, I had 9 aircraft overhead, and that was quickly joined by medevac aircraft and their escorts. Staff Sergeant Rob Henry was the CCT JTAC with the lead element, and I listened to him on the radio. He's a calm guy, and I heard what he was saying, and it took me a second to reconcile that calmness in his voice with what he was telling me. The enemy was employing a technique where they were trying to neutralize our firepower by hugging us, by getting so close to us that we couldn't drop bombs, we couldn't shoot hellfires. They were too close for us to use the asymmetric advantage that usually keeps us alive in combat. And let me elaborate on that. Admiral McRaven's definition of a special operation involves a force achieving relative superiority to another force that has conventional superiority. We had over 600 men. We had a lot of firepower, but the enemy's advantage in terrain, mobility, and preparation more than made up for their numerical inferiority, if that was even the case. There were so many of them, we may not have actually been the numerically superior force. Normally, air power is the asymmetric advantage that allows us to persevere in those circumstances. It gives ground soft the ability to defeat enemies who both have numerical superiority and are on the tactical defensive. Without precision strike capabilities, it's a fair fight at best, and that's not how we like to do things. So as I'm processing reports of the casualties and plotting updated and friendly positions on my map, through the fog of war, I realized that I can't apply that asymmetric capability from any of the aircraft that I have overhead except for one. I have an AC-130 uniform. Spooky 4-1 is our chance to get out of this thing. So I passed marking control to Staff Sergeant Henry. I cleared the airspace and I let these guys get to work. At that point, the gunship is our only chance of gaining and maintaining fire superiority. We needed fire support that exceeded the accuracy of what the enemy thought we could do, and we had to do it faster than they thought we could react. For me to drop a bomb, a GBU series from a fixed-wing aircraft, that would take at best 4 minutes. That's record speed. We didn't have 4 minutes to wait. There was no room for error. No room for error in delivery, no room for error in accuracy. We needed it now. And I believe I speak for all STJ TACs when I say that the reason we trusted Spooky 4-1 to shoot first rounds danger close in such a chaotic environment is not the hardware. To be sure, the AC-130 and its cannons are exactly what we needed. It was the only viable option at that moment, but the weapon system is only as good as the crew working it. Humans are more important than hardware. That's soft truth number one. Every night we go on objective, we trust you to be the asymmetric capability that gets us out of situations where we are outgunned. We train with you stateside. We see each other on the weekends. And for example, quick show of hands, who here got headbutted by Everett yesterday at Dewey's? Good number of you. Sorry about that, guys. But we know each other. We know each other's families. We see each other year after year, growing up with each other at the same duty stations. On that night, we needed you. And because we're part of the same tribe, if you will, we knew that any words that we said were going to be backed up by all those unspoken words, the things that we know just from being a tight team together, part of that AFSOC family. You heard Rob's voice, you heard my voice, and you sprung into action. Y'all have all seen the t-shirts, May the 4th be with you. That night, the 4th was with us, and it made all the difference. I can't overstate how critical the next moments were. Rob passed target info to Spooky 4-1, and their response was so fast, I distinctly remember wondering if they were even shooting at the right target. And indeed they were. On target, on time. The enemy thought that their proximity to friendlies would mitigate their ability for us to bring fires to bear on them, but now they're being chewed up by the AC-130's guns, and they got a problem. The assault force now had the space they needed to consolidate their position, evacuate the wounded, and regroup. The only viable landing zones were too far away. So the best solution, still fraught with risk, was to individually hoist the wounded in and out of the casualty collection point, well within the range of the enemy's machine guns and rocket-propelled grenades. Now, I've seen my share of medevac over the years. Time and again, I've seen the enemy take great risks when they have the opportunity to shoot down our helicopters, and I had a tremendous sense of dread watching this thing at a hover. This is how it happens. This is how aircraft get shot down and how tragedies become major tragedies. But the enemy didn't get a single shot off. Spooky 4-1 laid down a barrage of constant fires, denying the enemy to get into place or to get a shooting solution. And that mission didn't end once the wounded were safely evacuated. Once friendlies retrograded a safe distance away, we used that same binder of multi-source intelligence and real-time intelligence to pummel the enemy. F-16s arrived with 2,000-pounders, and I put some delay-fused 2,000-pounders into that network of tunnels to collapse the enemy's ability to retrograde. So what they were once using as a location to plan attacks on the United States, they were now trapped in, like shooting fish in a barrel for the next couple of days, and we did just that. It was a free fire area. Every single jet, RPA, and helicopter went back with slick wings, and we put all that ordnance directly onto the enemies of America. The result was a devastating blow to ISIS-K. We accounted for well over 100 enemy killed in action, several of whom were named objectives. Perhaps the most satisfying moment from my perspective was listening as ISIS-K commanders turned on each other, hurling extremely explicit insults at each other over their predicament. We also got to listen as the Taliban taunted ISIS-K on their radios, saying that they were going to come take the village because clearly ISIS couldn't hold it. But most importantly, once Spooky 4-1 started shooting, no further harm befell Americans or Afghan allies. When I got back to BAF after the mission, I made a beeline for the gunship guys. I met you on the ramp, and I thank you for what you've done with us. I jumped onto the plane, and I thanked you in my way that I do, and I shook your hands one by one. And if it were not for that incredible display of airmanship, there's zero doubt in my mind that American lives would have been lost that day. Your actions allowed us to turn this battle from a tragedy into a major rout of enemy forces. On behalf of my Special Tactics teammates, thank you for your professionalism. Thank you for your tireless work in preparing for these most critical moments of our careers. And thank you to the families whose support and understanding makes all of this possible. Hoo-yah, Spooky 4-1.
Good morning. Distinguished guests, friends and family members, and especially you air crew Spooky 4-1. I just want to say thank you for giving us the opportunity to be a part of this momentous occasion. It's not very often that we get to see some of our brothers be so adequately recognized for their courage and steadfast commitment to duty and our great nation, so thank you for inviting us. About a year ago, all across Afghanistan, there was a lot of buzz about a big operation that was in development that was directly tied to national security. ISIS had been reeling from devastating defeats across the Levant, and they'd been putting together a new base of operations in the austere mountains of southern Afghanistan in Nangarhar, around a place called Tora Bora. Now, this name should sound familiar to most of you, as it's a part of Afghanistan that Osama bin Laden used to escape the initial wrath of the U.S. military might in the days and weeks following September 11th of 2001. So there's a special significance for America tied to this operation due to the location and proximity that was going on. And we had very credible intelligence to support that ISIS was not only preparing for their summer fighting season in Afghanistan, but also directly supporting attacks against the United States on our homeland from a command location deep inside the Kugyani district of Nangarhar in a village called Barsangani. An outpouring of intelligence reports told us that Barsangani was an impenetrable forest of caves and tunnel systems and in-depth fighting positions and bunkers that we would pay for every step that we took in that stronghold with the blood of U.S. soldiers, and we were strongly recommended not to go in. 2 weeks prior, a smaller assault force had lost 3 men trying to get a foothold and were never even able to break through. Well, George Washington crossed the Delaware and Josh Chamberlain charged at Gettysburg, and Eisenhower even stormed the beaches of Normandy, so by God, we were going to go into Barsangani. For about a month, our 600-man assault force planned and rehearsed an operation that many of us knew would be the hardest fighting that we've probably ever done, and for some of us it was. We'd be scoring up against hardened foreign fighters, not the Taliban next generation of 15-year-old fighters that we've been seeing the last 2 decades of fighting, but these were foreign fighters that were bent and wanted nothing more than the destruction of our values, to kill us and destroy our American way of life. This mission meant something to all of us, and it meant defeating enemies and protecting our homeland, our families and our friends, and those of you sitting here in the crowd today. And it just cannot be understated how serious these threats were, dialed down to individuals in specific cities in the U.S. that were being prepared for imminent attacks. To give you an idea of the caliber of men that were leading this assault force, the night before we launched into the village, we got a Red Cross message from one of our soldiers' wives notifying us that she was going into labor early and that her husband, Colin Lightfoot, needed to come home if he wanted to be a part of that event. We saw Colin the next day in the hangar, just like this one that we're in today, that we were all staging in. And I asked him if he wanted to go, and he didn't even think twice about it. And the next time I heard his name was the following day when his battle roster number was called across the radio saying that he was injured and was in need of an urgent medical evacuation along with 12 other Afghans that had been wounded in the fighting. Ben Carnell, who's sitting in the crowd with you today, had already been shot a half an hour before that and was being evacuated for the moment. And I paused there and became acutely aware of just the symphony of destruction that was being orchestrated around us, and especially the biggest gun that we had in the fight, Spooky 4-1. Though the aircrew had been in the sky watching our initial assault, providing covering fire as necessary throughout the operation to this point, it was now the speed and accuracy and pure professionalism that was brought to bear that truly amazed me. And when every second mattered and lives were on the line, everybody was on top of their game in that aircraft, 100% and then some. And because of what you guys did, your steadfast commitment to men you'd never met, men like Colin Lightfoot got to meet his daughter. Instead, and families across America got to wake up and not hear the news about another tragic terrorist attack on our U.S. soil. And for over 4 days of fighting, with your help, we would destroy countless enemy fighters. Well, we counted, and it was a lot. But more interesting, we would stack up a pocket full of medals, including numerous Purple Hearts, individual Valor medals, and 3 Silver Stars for conspicuous gallantry across 2 different organizations, our ground force on the ground and then the medevac pilots that were pulling our guys out. And most importantly on this one, we bring everybody home. And now we add your awards to the tally of heroic actions that happened during the Battle of Barsingani. And I've always wondered if it's fitting or if it's unfortunate that some of the greatest moments of your lives and our lives in the service will only be known by the handful of those that lived through it with us. I know that we don't do it for awards or acceptance speeches or accolades, but we do it because we love it and we love this country. And I've been nothing short of humbled by your commitment to your profession and your commitment to each other. And though most will never hear your stories of service and sacrifice, I'll always know what you did for my men, and I'll never forget it. God bless you. God bless America. Deo Presto Libere.
Good morning. I'll echo what Major Tomlin said. I can't say how fortunate I feel to be here. The appreciation that we have for being able to join you in this event and the recognition of what Spooky 4-1 did. But I wanted to provide some context as a guy on the ground, just how important their professionalism and heroism was, not only to the operation, but to countless lives and families as we move on from that event. It made me think of a couple things about leadership, and just hearing the crew last night talk about all the things they had to do to provide accurate fire. It echoed and really exponentiated what I thought about leadership with regards to this operation. When something's worthwhile, leaders are drawn to it, and they find a way to overcome obstacles. So as Major Tomlin said, as we got this intelligence that we need to conduct this operation, it became apparent that it would prevent an attack on the homeland. There were those that pushed back, saying that it couldn't be done. And I'll brag on my commander for a minute. I sat in a brief with him, and an intelligence officer had laid out a very compelling case why we shouldn't go in there. And I was prepared to back him up with a whole series of academic statements about why we should go in. And I'll never forget, he looked at me and said, well, we descend from the people that ascended Point to Hawk, so we can do it. And it was just that type of commitment and leadership and coolness that would end up carrying the day, both on the ground and in the air. We would be stood down prior to the operation, and we lost a lot of steam. We weren't sure we were going to conduct it. But like I said, leaders rise to the occasion. And as we were spun back up, it was incredible to see the logistics and combat power that were brought to bear to move across the Sajoa to provide fires and get us to the fight that night. And so leaders set conditions. There were some logistics to both get us there, and also that the air crew faced that night in the AC-130. Just hearing their stories last night about powering down systems and preserving fuel so they could stay in the fight for just one moment longer to provide one more accurate shot to protect us was phenomenal. Leaders build trust. I met Major Wright maybe a week before we conducted this operation, and the way he articulated the air plan to protect our maneuver on the ground was incredible, and it instilled in me the trust that would be required to move out on that objective, knowing that a crew like Spooky 4-1 and JTACs could provide accurate fire to protect my maneuver and the maneuver of my brothers. Leaders are calm and rise to the occasion. I'd like to sit here and describe to you just how horrendous the terrain was and how hardened those fighters were and how dug in they were, but I can't. I don't have the words to articulate it. I'm not smart enough, and it was just that vicious. Unfortunately, I think a lot of operations are graded by how many wounded there are, or unfortunately how many mortal casualties there are. And this objective certainly warranted several, but because of planning, the ferocity of the assault force, and the professionalism of the air crew overhead, we fortunately brought everybody home. That's not to say that it wasn't a place that many men could have died. But in the worst moments, in the most confusing moments, leaders rose to the occasion. The crew last night explained to us just how tight they were on ammo and ammunition and fuel, and the tight decisions they made to make sure they could stay on station just a little bit longer. It's moved me in a way that I can't really describe, and I won't go on much longer, but I think it's important that I say from the regiment, from the assault force, and more specifically from my wife and my son and my daughter, I want to thank you for your professionalism and for rising to the occasion. Without any of that, I would not have been hoisted out of there, and I wouldn't be standing here in front of you today. So I'm indebted to you in a way I can't describe, and I want to thank you all for joining us and celebrating their heroism. Thank you.